Hello everyone, my name is Rami Branitzky and I'm a partner at Sapphire Ventures. On behalf of my partners and my colleagues at the firm, welcome to our 2020 CIO Summit opening session. I'm honored to kick things off with a very special guest, Christian Klein. Christian needs little introduction for most of you as Chief Executive Officer, Chief Operating Officer, and a member of the SAP Executive Board. Christian is responsible for leading SAP's transformation into an intelligent enterprise. Christian started his career at SAP back in 1999 as a student, and over time held various leadership positions, among which I should note as SuccessFactors Chief Financial Officer following its acquisition by SAP. Christian was also named as member of the very exclusive 40 Under 40 list by Capital Magazine in 2018 and is also an avid skier. Christian, thank you for joining us and welcome to our 2020 CIO Summit.
Yeah, thanks, Rami, and also thanks a lot for the warm welcome. And yeah, indeed, skiing is a passion. Obviously, in the last months, there was not so much time for skiing, but happy to have now this conversation with you and the team.
Terrific. Thanks so much. So I guess first question that comes to mind, you became, if I'm not mistaken, you became a co-CEO back in October and a sole CEO in April. And now you're steering pretty much a $200 billion market cap through worst pandemic in the last 100 years. So I guess my first question is, how's it going? Tell us a bit more about the first few months as a CEO of SAP.
Indeed, a very valid question, Rami. And as you can see, I'm still smiling. So despite indeed that was quite exciting last 6 months, not only that I became the sole CEO at the same night, I actually also became second-time father. So I'm used to deal with challenges, but this challenge was actually pretty special. And then, as you said, on top, I also had to manage together with my 100,000 employees at SAP. I had to manage this pandemic, and SAP is known for running very mission critical business processes across the globe. Actually, we're running huge parts of the economy with our software, and I had a lot of phone calls from CEOs of other companies being scared about our ability to run their business processes, especially in the cloud. And I'm very proud to say that despite this pandemic and 95% people working from home remotely, we still managed to keep our business up and running by almost 100%, and we had over 17,000 go lives to support the transformation of our customers. So I'm really proud about the team and how we are doing in this crisis.
That's very, very impressive, Christian. So when I was preparing for this session, I've heard you talk multiple times about the intelligent enterprise. And for those in the audience, those who are listening to us, could you explain the difference between what you consider to be an intelligent enterprise versus, I guess, for lack of a better term, a dumb enterprise? And specifically now, given the context of COVID, how do these organizations that we consider to be intelligent fare out versus those who are not prepared?
Yeah, no, good question, Rami. I mean, look, in this crisis, as I mentioned, I had a lot of conversations with many CEOs across every industry, across the geographies, and everyone, said, we were already before the pandemic in the transformation, but it was more or less like saying, okay, we have to do this in parallel, we have to do it carefully, and now the conversation is more around, hey, Christian, the transformation is a must. It's not optional anymore. As my business is not resilient enough, how can I open up new sales channels who also work 24/7 in such a pandemic when there is a lockdown happening? So commerce is a big topic. How can I keep my supply chain resilient? How can I use your new technologies to better predict the demand and organize the supply? Where do I find the suppliers who can still deliver? And there is a lot of technology now which we infuse into the intelligent enterprise, who is enabling our customers to do exactly that. But this is a change, and this is not only technology. As I was formerly also the COO of SAP, it's also about changing the way how companies run. It's also changing the culture. Trust me, the change from on-premise to cloud was something for SAP which was not easy, because you are changing also business processes, you are changing your operating model, and you have to take your employees with you. You have to change also then, of course, subsequently the system and embed new technologies. And this is actually, what we are doing with our customers. And the transformation to an intelligent enterprise is about, AI and data, but it's also at the same time, changing the way how people work, the way how enterprises work. And you should never forget that the two things have to really come together at the end.
For sure. And it's interesting you're touching on culture. What do you see is the transformation that the culture has to take in light of becoming intelligent enterprise, viable and able to sustain such a major blow like the pandemic?
Yeah, I guess it's also a lot about leading from the top. Yeah, and it's also a lot about communication. Yeah, because you have to take your people with you. You cannot drive this change. And obviously, it's also a culture about listening to your customers, about feeling about how do their business model change. I have not always a good feel when I'm presented a winning plan for S4HANA or for SuccessFactors for HR without knowing the market context. You have to feel the pulse of the market and also understand where are these line of businesses going to, how will the new technologies adapt the way how people work, how can we make these processes more intelligent. And then second, it's also about the industries. Today I had a conversation about Walgreens and Boots Alliance, where we talked about all the changes in the retail industry, where we now with our industry cloud solutions want to expand our portfolio and serve these new business models for retail. Yesterday I had this Daimler CEO, Ola Kolenius, where we talked deeply about new car sharing concepts, new license models, what Daimler has to offer, autonomous driving, what kind of software do they need for that, how much intelligence will come into the car, but also how much intelligence do they need in the production and manufacturing area. So it's also an industry talk, and there's massive change, and this culturally change needs to happen. And from my eyes, it also needs to happen top down, that you have clear leadership, that you have leadership who's embracing this change and is not holding up on things which have worked maybe 20 years, but will not work the 20 years ahead.
That's right. And it's interesting you mention industries, because I think that the impact of the pandemic and the economic crisis are not one size fits all. As we know and as we see, some industries are doing fairly well or even great, and some industries are struggling big time. And it's interesting that SAP has to accommodate both scenarios, the hyper-growth retailers who do well in this environment versus those who struggle. It could be even in the same industry itself, where you can see two different scenarios, and yet SAP has to support both use cases in a sense.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I mean, also with all the respect to the hyperscalers, and they are running at massive scale, they have a very successful business and building up new data centers, almost every month, and really consuming a lot of landscapes across the world and putting on their infrastructure. But again, what I'm always saying is, putting your ERP on a hyperscaler infrastructure is not doing anything on the business transformation side, when you are not changing the way, to my earlier point, the way how people work in the company, the business processes, or when you are not changing your engagement models with your customers, not offering new license models, then you probably run at a better cost rate. You are maybe running a hopefully more resilient, but you are not actually adapting to the new reality. And this is where SAP comes into play. We have our own things we have to solve in order to make this even more affordable for our customers. So we are coming from a world where we build a monolith ERP system. In the cloud, it's all modular. So we are now having in the cloud, also in the ERP side, modulars to adapt faster to these changes, because the CEOs I was just talking about, they cannot wait 5 years until they have an intelligent spend management, until they have an intelligent supply chain, until they can serve their customers with new business models. And they need to do it now, and our software needs to, of course, adapt to that. But again, that's, of course, the interesting thing about SAP. There you talk business, there you talk about, and when you don't talk about these things and you just also see an ERP migration or SuccessFactors migration as another technical project sitting together with IT, something is wrong.
Do customers understand the distinction between the business process and the transformation at the business level versus the hyperscalers and the services that they offer? Do they understand that distinction, the line of demarcation, if you will?
Some of them do, some of them less. Honestly, we see very successful examples. We see, of course, also examples which were way too much IT-driven only. But that's also part of our job, to guide our customers through that. I mean, we have over 400,000 customers running our solution, so we should also have some best practices and give them the benchmark what the most successful companies do, business process-wise and business model-wise, and what maybe companies do who are less successful. Also show them projects actually which failed, just to also learn out of failure.
I want to switch gears and talk about acquisitions. So SAP over the years obviously has acquired a lot of assets, ranging from business objects back in 08 or 09, if I'm not mistaken, to SuccessFactors, Concur, and now of course Qualtrics most recently. And these are massive acquisitions. And philosophically, there's always a tension between the desire to keep these businesses as standalone P&L, retain their culture, brand, and independence. But at the same time, there's a strong push, both in terms of product as well as organizational impact, to integrate and integrate quickly. I'm just curious, there are pros and cons for each, but how do you view it? What's your philosophy on this?
I mean, there is, of course, this is a delicate balance, and you have to be very sensitive, also culturally, how you deal with these acquisitions, once they are then part of SAP, because there is not one right answer to that. It's not about just integrating them and going for cost synergies. Otherwise, you would destroy a lot of business value what you acquired. But it's also not like that you should keep them completely alone, because otherwise, when you are not making them part of your portfolio, what is actually the reason of doing this acquisition? Customers need to see the value of the solutions coming together. So actually, I guess the right strategy going forward is that we are running business processes. So we are running businesses which are mission critical, and for that we need a strong foundation. There is one platform called the Business Technology Platform, where we share our domain models, where we share our business services, so that once a customer is buying certain solutions for certain mission critical business processes, this has to come out of the box. Customers, of course, also, no matter if they want SuccessFactors, Ariba, or S4, we need to provide them one quality standard, one harmonized SLAs, one level of cybersecurity, actually a very high aspiration on cybersecurity, as we own a lot of mission critical data from our customers in the cloud. And this is the basis. But then, of course, you also need to address the different lines of businesses, because the buying centers are also changing. In the past times, 20 years ago, it was oftentimes the CIO who says, all in, we go for SAP. And suddenly, you have, to address also the CHRO. You have a discussion with the CFO when it comes about the next finance situation. Supply chain it's not an easy topic, but you also have to talk to a head of supply chain. So that's actually what you still have to do, and you have to also innovate according to these lines of businesses. So I guess that's the balance. This is you need to act on one platform. You have to share your data. You have to drive integration, and the enterprise can only be intelligent if it's integrated. Or look at our customer Apple. When you buy in the Apple Store, it's our solution, but we also make sure that the distribution works. We also make sure that the supply chain works, and the experience hopefully is only as good as the software also runs in the back. And that's actually a unique selling point of SAP, we forgot about that a bit in the last years, and now we are fixing it so that we have one strong business
So
technology.
specifically end-to-end seamless integration, also at the data level, in addition to security, in addition to workflows. So acquired assets are going to have to kind of like fit in to that platform. That's what you're saying effectively?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And look, I mean, also into the startup scene and into, the ecosystem, especially around data. I mean, data is so key. There is no intelligence in business processes when the data is not fitting together, when the semantics are not fitting together. There's also not a 360 view of the customer or real-time steering if the data is not fitting together. So customers have to have a why that at least the semantics match when you buy SAP systems. And, of course, there is also a big trend now putting, big data into place, building these big data lakes. But again, one of the biggest challenges what all of our customers have is to also get semantics right, to digest this data, to analyze the data in a meaningful way. And that's, of course, the trick also with SAP and non-SAP data. This is why we are also quite active in that space. But of course, for SAP data, you have to have one domain model.
So I'll be remiss in this context of acquisitions not to ask, because I know a lot of people want to ask this question about the decision, the strategic intent behind taking Qualtrics public again.
Yeah, that was indeed one of the more difficult decisions in the first 6 months, but for sure I'm convinced the absolute right one. Because when you look at Qualtrics is not, part of our core. I mean, this is experience management. That's a category which sits actually on top of all of our applications. And so it's not part of a business process. It's not like that you have to get it extremely closely integrated in a way that you run business process. Of course, there needs some level of integration to combine experience data with operational data to, again, deliver business value, but it's not that close to the core. And then Qualtrics was now or is now 2 years in SAP, almost 2 years. It developed extremely well. We see very decent growth rates, and also in the pandemic, it's feeling the sentiment of customers and employees and suppliers is very crucial, especially these days. And then we said, okay, what we are doing today, product strategy wise and go to market wise, penetrating the SAP install base is something what we can also do in the future. But there is also a big market outside of SAP who also now needs to move into the experience management category. And we believe with an IPO and giving them some kind of independence that we can also capture that market, that we are opening up Qualtrics also for other strategic investors to also, have even higher growth outside of SAP. And at the end, it's also good news for our CFO. We will stay the majority shareholder, so we will still consolidate fully the P&L. So everything what Qualtrics is doing in the SAP install base, but also outside the SAP install base, is ending up in our P&L. So I can absolutely see no downside.
It's a fantastic win-win. Yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears because I want to talk a little bit about you, if it's okay. You obviously had a very quick rise within the ranks of SAP. And I'm just curious, along the way, any mentors that helped you along the way, any great advice that you can share that you got along the way that helped you reach the pinnacle of your career now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when I look back, it's almost 20 years now at SAP. Time flies. I guess the biggest benefit I have now in my role as the CEO, I actually have seen almost the whole company. So I was in service and support, customer success. I was part of finance. I was part of I was the CFO of SuccessFactors. So I was in the valley for 2 years, and also have seen how a cloud company runs. I was the COO driving the transformation of SAP. I was at some point of time also the chief controlling officer for Jim Snabe once he was the co-CEO. And that was, of course, for me very important to never be only stay in one part of the company, but really understand the company end to end. This is definitely something where I'm benefiting today, because when you look at my day to day, just came out of a financial plan discussion with Luca. Before, I had a customer conversation around their transformation in retail. In the morning, we had a discussion about integration and how can we accelerate that and get even faster done. So you have a broad range of topics, and I guess that's very important. The more you also move up in the management hierarchy, that you also have a broad profile and a broad expertise, no matter if this is now within SAP or outside of SAP. Of course, for me, I had good luck. Somehow, I always made another step, closely, where I actually said, okay, now my learning curve has come to an end, and then, SAP gave me the opportunity to rise. That's why I never left SAP, despite one time I was very close of doing it, but this now would go too much into detail.
Not today.
And then the second advice is, of course, the mentor. I mean, I had very different characters, starting with Gerd Oswald. There I learned to think always from a customer perspective, very structured, of course, understanding, how our business, how our customers are operating their business. I was then, with Jim Hagemann-Snabe in his time as the co-CEO, a completely different personality, but I could learn a lot. Again, especially how he acted as the co-CEO, and Jim had this talent to take the people with him, to explain the strategy, and has this empathy, to also make sure that all the shareholders, everyone, the stakeholders are with him, on his way executing the strategy.
Yeah, Jim certainly, to me too, is one of the best leaders I've ever experienced working for. So it's interesting because normally CEOs of large tech companies come from either a strong development background or a sales background. That's usually the archetype. And in your case, you're a much more multidimensional practitioner. So you've experienced multiple facets of the organization, which I think is a great lesson learned for a lot of folks as well.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I mean, a SaaS product can only be successful. It cannot be successful when you only have a great product. If you don't know how to, also make the time to value work, if you don't know how to also operate that at scale, if you don't know how to drive high adoption and the upsell, it will not work. And you have to, of course, also generally a great value proposition to also underscore the business value. If you cannot make this work end to end, then you probably will fail for one reason or the other. So the profile of having this, to oversee that and making sure the interlock is happening is extremely important in such kind of role. But of course, we also have expert roles in SAP, and they are also highly appreciated. I mean, you need the best experts in cybersecurity, the best in data science now. So there are always different career paths. But for me, it's always about, having, seen a lot of different spots in SAP is very helpful. And the mentorship was very good, because I have seen different leaders acting in very different ways, and also adapting myself to that was first very important, because you will, at that kind of level, you have to deal with a lot of personalities, and you cannot just go away and say, no, that's not working. You have to adapt yourself, but you, of course, always can also learn a lot, for your ongoing career in the future.
For sure. We had a question from the audience, and specifically, we have a bunch of startups and investors in the audience as well. So not necessarily your traditional SAP ecosystem folks. And the question has to do with the partnership experience. Over the years, SAP, and for a variety of reasons, hasn't been the easiest company to partner with. And now I know that there's like a massive effort underway to change that perception and change that reality for many. In fact, one of our companies, Project 44, has a partnership in place with SAP now that is very, very successful. So we're very happy to see that. Could you talk a little bit about these efforts and philosophically how you view the ecosystem's significance?
Yeah, indeed. And, we are also extremely happy about the partnership with P44. It works, and it just shows how important the ecosystem is for SAP. And let me tackle it from both sides. So first, when you look into the intelligent enterprise and when you look into the development space, there is no way that we can support the transformation of our customers only with SAP developed solutions. We have to be open. Our platform also needs to have a very strong API layer to also integrate in a seamless way and make it easier for startups, for partners to also extend our own core application solution portfolio. That's very important. The platform needs to be world-class not only from an API layer, but also from a productivity perspective. Because again, in the industry cloud, if we take that example, again, we don't have the thought leadership for all of the 25 industries. We never had that. So we need partners with us, to really expand that. And the same is, of course, for the LOBs as with P44. That was really, the very important piece which was missing. And now we have brought our solutions together. And now we can really also operate, especially on the logistics and transportation management side, in a very cohesive way. And we create this win-win. So that's very important on the development side. To your point, Rami, I fully agree. SAP was not always the simple company to do business with. So when you come in as a startup, as a partner, and you want to have a solution and you want to bring this into the App Store, you want to deploy it on our platform, the payment models have to work. There's still room for improvement, and we know that, and we are heavily investing in improving the experience for our partners across the life cycle. And we are heavily investing, as I want to attract a lot of partners and startups to extend our solution portfolio. And this is what we are currently working on. We made good progress, but at the end I want to have the best experience. And at the end it's also about the license models and the commercial models. At the end the partnership has to work in both ways. So that's also something that we, of course, our partners and the startups also participate in the success we then have together. And that's very essential for me. But we are just doing a complete revamp of our product strategy. And I told all of the product owners, don't come with a presentation where we are not screening the ecosystem and the startup phase to also make sure that we also extending our portfolio in a very attractive way for our customers, because there is no way, not in one line of business, not in one industry, where we can go without partners. But of course, we need to do it in a strategic way, because once we give a space to a partner or to a startup, SAP should not 2 years later come in and say, oh, by the way, now we do it by our own. Sorry for that. So it needs to happen in a structured way. This is what we are doing, so that the partners and the startups also have a reliable partner with SAP. And last but not least, this, Rami, I spend a lot of time with you and the team to go through your investments, because I always want to know what is going on in your portfolio, to see what is in there for SAP, but of course also to always feel the pulse out there in the market. That's extremely important for me. So I love also to be engaged in this community, because it helps to also have always a solid view about what is happening in the market.
For sure. And you mentioned earlier when we talked about culture that it has to start from the top. And it's great to hear you as a CEO talking about the notion of openness and the partner ecosystem and your commitment to it, because I think that without that type of commitment from the very top, it is really difficult to implement that type of strategy.
Yeah, indeed. And it has to come from the top, and we have to have, we always have to think broad. And as I said, in the weekend we have our board offsite, and all the product managers are asked to present their plans. And I hope they always have a good proposal in there how to deal with the ecosystem. That's very important from my perspective.
Christian, I want to thank you so much for a fascinating conversation and for taking the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk to you soon.
All the best. Take care.